about how internet affects parents and students and people in the education system. We're going to hear from Tom Shepard, who's a member of the New York City Panel on Education Policy. And he's got a lot to say. Y'all can hear me okay? Yeah. All right, so I'm going to project because that's what I do. So here we go. So before I start, actually, I am retired military, and I was a Navy electrician, okay? And when I came back to New York City 15 years ago, I wasn't a member of IBW. I was part of the other one. But I do have to say that I stand with you because companies should not, absolutely should not, like deny workers the rights that they have, especially around forming unions, especially around making sure that they have the pay and benefits that they deserve. So I want you to know that I stand with you. Yeah. All right, so y'all heard from folks today about the need for public Wi-Fi, like how these things all connect to each other. Whether we're talking about economics, in other words, people need to be able to find jobs and connect with each other. Healthcare, right? So we need, medical systems nowadays are all connected via the internet. Our medical records, our access to doctors are all connected to the internet, right? So I'm going to focus a little bit on education. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with a little bit of a story, because this is not something brand new. This is not something that we all know about because of this pandemic. This is something that has existed for years. So a few years ago, I was a volunteer at my kid's school, and having worked at Apple for 10 years, I have a background in building out networks and supporting technology. So I had a conversation with the principal, and we decided that we were going to create digital classrooms. So I gave 3 years of my time, volunteer, got Apple to donate $25 for every hour that I donated, configured and rolled out 400 iPads in this school. Now, I'm not saying this because I want accolades. What I want you to understand is what happened next. When we decided that we were going to send students home with these devices, one of the things that we came across was that many students did not have access to the internet at home. So basically, the iPads that we configured and sent these children home with, they could not use at home. So I decided that I was going to reach out to one of the local cable providers that has public hotspots. If everybody looks on their phone right now, there's a public hotspot on it. And I asked them, could you connect the iPads in this school to your public Wi-Fi network so that kids can have access at home? And their response was no. So now we're going to fast forward a few years, and we're going to look at this pandemic. And what this pandemic showed everybody is something that many of us have known for many years, that if you do not have access to Wi-Fi, you are cut off from your school. Period. Point blank. I could drop this mic right now, and y'all would know exactly what I'm talking about. So the truth is, there are roughly 10%, it's 9% I believe, but I'm going to say almost 10% of students in the New York City public school system that still do not have access to the internet. And what does that mean? That means you have almost 10%, 9%, right, that are literally disconnected from their schools. And what does that mean? It means they are falling behind. It means that they are not getting the education that they have a right to. I hear people say what we deserve all the time, but we have a right. Our children have a right to an education. It is written in the law that our kids have a right to a public school education. And during this pandemic, if you are not connected to the internet, you are not connected to your school. Therefore, you are not getting the public education that you have a right to.
That ain't right.
So, if we had a municipal broadband system, if we had publicly available free Wi-Fi for our students, right, would we still have this issue? Probably, right? Because we do have issues with access to technology, right? And access to technology is, related, but we're talking about access to the internet, right? So this would still exist. But with access to the internet, solving the other problem actually becomes a little easier, because you can then put a device in everyone's hand knowing that the device is going to connect to the internet. Okay, so if we had a municipal broadband internet system, if we had publicly available Wi-Fi, right, our kids would not be disconnected from school. If, and this is where all of you become important. Now see how I did that, right? It is up to all of you to demand, and I don't use the word demand a lot, right? I say we need to call on so-and-so to do such and such. But this is the part where all of you need to demand that the city and the state and the feds, whoever it is, provide funding, right? And provide the labor, unionized labor, to make a municipal broadband internet service available for all of our families, and they should not have to pay for it. We do not have to pay for a public school education, so we should not have to pay for a connection to that public school education. All right, so I'm going to wrap up because I get long-winded and I talk a lot. But what I want to say is this. The last thing I want to say is this. We have the potential, we have the opportunity to change the way that education works for our families, but it requires you. It requires you to show up. It requires you to tell the DOE. It requires you to lean on those folks that are running for public office. It requires you to, insist to our cable providers, telecom companies. It requires you to say that it is unacceptable for all of us in the 21st century to be disconnected when we know that our lives are connected, right? I'm going to say this, I'm sorry, y'all, but when I was a kid, right, it was the phone, right? I'm 50 and I'm proud of it. When I was a kid, it was the phone. And we realized that having a phone, if you did not have a phone, you were literally disconnected from the world, right? And nowadays, that connection to the outside world is the internet. This is not rocket science, people. So we need to demand that our connection to the outside world is not something that, we should be hit over the head for. We should not be spending $200 and $300 a month just to communicate with each other.
Crazy. Yeah.
This is insanity. All right, I'm going to stop, but I just want to thank all of y'all for being here. This will not change without you. This will not change without y'all.
Yeah.
And thank you, and I really appreciate it.